Hi, Lance. Thanks for opting into the video critique here. Been looking at your icons for a few minutes here, trying to think about the direction I would encourage you to go. Um, I think you have some nice things going on. I like your color scheme, the purple with the teal and the green. That's really nice. I noticed you have a recurring element of the sun in each of these, which is good. Um, I like a few of the elements like here. I like the bottom of the skateboard. This looks very interesting, seeing the hinges and how you have it laid out. This wave is neat. Okay, so let's take some of those things and then try to figure out how to keep those while maybe simplifying some of the other elements. So the first thing I would encourage you to do is I want you to think about icons and to get rid of any stroke that's going to disappear when these icons get small. So that's called scalability. So let's pretend these icons are on your phone, okay, and you're looking at your phone screen. So you're going to lose a lot of these fine details. You can still actually see the screen, the line on the midline on your surfboard, but I still think this is too small of a line there. And you want to really pay attention to the shapes of these elements as opposed to the lines in them. So when you do that, this surfboard becomes an outer oval and then three ovals inside of it. And this top one isn't really an oval, but hopefully you see what I'm saying. This is a paddleboard. The paddleboard becomes this kind of U-shaped with one long line and then a line up here. Okay, so think very simplistically about the shapes that make up each of these elements. And then that's what you want to use as opposed to fine lines. Okay, so when we zoom in, we see on your snowboard here, you actually have a lot going on. You have these kind of cool sunburst shapes and they have a stroke on them. You have this purple shape and it has a blue stroke on it. These are all made of strokes as well. You may have made this just out of an oval and then added the strokes, but instead I would encourage you to make a square shape with kind of a D semicircle back here and two semicircles, okay? So think about them in terms of shapes as opposed to one big shape that you're breaking up with strokes that you're making or lines, okay? I would also eliminate the outer strokes on all of these. They're going to be so much more contemporary and modern looking if you just let the shape do the speaking as opposed to having any kind of stroke. Now, I will say the one that comes the closest to having strokes and still looking modern is this one. Because I think the strokes are a lot thicker, and so it looks a little bit better than where they're so thin here. But still, I'd probably encourage you to head in the direction of just getting rid of those. And thinking about it in terms of the overall shape. Now, when you do that, you're going to lose some of this fine detail. Like you have this cool recurring wave in the background that also appeared up here, which I like the nod to something that appears in another icon. But honestly, it's too fine of a detail to look like a modern contemporary icon set. Okay, now your backgrounds is something else we really need to simplify. The best background you have is this one. Now, if you could have something like this appear in your other ones, then I would say it works. To have each of them different, plus such a variety of main focal elements, is a little bit too much for an icon set. So maybe you look at this one and then you say, okay, for my skateboard, I'm going to have, you know, dark gray, light gray, blue sky with the skateboard on it. The sun is something I could actually do without as well, unless you make it quite a bit bigger. Maybe 5 or 6 times bigger, and maybe it's going off the edge of the page. I'm not quite sure what you used to make this, but do remember you're not supposed to have any kind of filter or effect. So it looks like it has a bit of a gradient to it. Instead, you just want to focus purely on the shapes. So that's one of those minimum requirements. I'm not married to it. If you love it, just make sure it's a shape as opposed to any kind of effect. Maybe yellow with orange around it or something. Okay. So I think heading in that direction is going to get you to where you need to go. Now let's take a look at a few examples I didn't put in boards, I just put in surfing. But um, let's see. So this board, this might be a good example. This actually does have kind of a stroke, but it's probably made up of an actual shape. Let's zoom in and take a look. See how thick this is? That kind of helps it. And then these, look at the overall shapes of these. Mostly these are just lines. They have this white middle section, which you're doing as well. And this one is a really good example. Okay, see how these are shapes and then there's no stroke on the edge. Look how nice and clean that looks. That's a really good example. For a sun, you could do something like this. See how it has the different colors, but there's no effect on it. I wonder if I type in, oh, this one was neat. Okay, so see there's a good amount of things going on. And here's kind of a recurring palm tree element. But within that, the color scheme is simple. There's no super fine lines, okay? Maybe you could argue these are fine lines, but by and large, they're pretty thick. This surfboard, for example, has some pretty thick stroke around it. Nothing's thin enough that it's going to disappear. Here's some other good examples. I don't love these actually, because look how thin that is. You're going to lose those. These are super simple ones. Okay, so usually with icons, you want to err on the side of simplicity. Then what makes them interesting is the color scheme, is the way that you've put the icons on the page. Like look at how nice those thick strokes are there. It's really kind of cool and interesting looking, but a little bit more simplistic than what I think you're currently doing. And you put a lot of time into these, but it's just a little bit too much detail. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. And trying to think if there's anything else that might help you head in the right direction. Just kind of click through some of these. They might provide some good inspiration. A lot of what people are doing now is they add a circle in the background that's a color. I think yours are maybe a little bit too elaborate to have that work well, but something like this could work. This one was a good example of that. Okay, so this is kind of more the direction we want to head in. Scalability is a big attribute for icons. So that's the main thing I think you need to focus on right now. Your color scheme is good. The idea behind them is good. I like how they're roughly scaled the same and you have some neat elements. You just got to pull it together so it really, really resembles an icon set as opposed to some cool pictures that look good when they're big as opposed to really having the scalability for when they're large and tomorrow. Okay, or when they're large and small. All right, so thanks, Lance. Hopefully that was helpful. If you want, feel free to email me a second draft since I think I've given you a lot of things to possibly work with. You could head in a variety of directions. If you want some feedback, feel free to let me know later on or midweek. All right, thanks, Lance.